Hello and welcome, instructor training video on the LearnSpeed system. My name is Zach, I'm LearnSpeed's lead support and training specialist, and I'm going to be walking you through the system today. In this video, we are going to cover activating your account and getting your username and password, filling out your profile and availability to make sure you're matched with students, what to do when you are matched with a student, scheduling sessions on the calendar before they happen, and logging sessions to ensure that you're paid and the family is billed properly. All right, let's talk about how to set up your account. That starts with an email, and it looks like this. It's an invitation to join LearnSpeed. It should come from A In Home Tutors. And there's a couple of links here. There's the set up your account link, and we'll be following this in just a second. And there's always a link to the login page once we do get our account set up. And there's actually a link to this video. So if you ever forget, you've got it here in your email. All right, so to set up your account, you'll just hit that set up your account link. And you'll agree to the license agreement. You sell your soul away to us. And then you go ahead and enter all of your username and password that you'd like. Then just hit save. And your account is created. As I mentioned, from then on out, anytime you want to log in, you can just head to learnspeed.com/login. Here's that page, and you can even go ahead and bookmark this page for the future if you'd like, so you can easily log in whenever you want. There's one last thing I want to show you what not to do. So if the administrators have told you that you need to activate your account, that you need to set your account up, and you don't see this email here, it's tempting to head to LearnSpeed's homepage, and you'll see that handy little sign up link here, and you think, aha, this is perfect. You click on this and it brings you to this form. Unfortunately, this is not how you want to set your account up. This actually sets you up with a new trial account that is not connected to your account at A In Home Tutors. So you're not going to be able to see any of your students or your calendar or log your sessions, and it's all going to be confusing. So if you do not see that email in your inbox, please just contact the administrators. They'll send you another one. Of course, you always want to check your spam folder here to make sure that it didn't go in there. But it should always start here with that email, and you should click the set up your account link here in the email in order to make sure that everything's connected properly. This is what it looks like when you log into LearnSpeed. If this is your first time, I'm sure there's a lot of new stuff here, but let's ignore that for now because there's one thing I want to show you before we get started, and that is how to complete your profile. You set up your username and password. Now we want to flesh out everything else. So go ahead and head up to the top of the page. This My Account link here at the top brings you to the My Account page, and there's some things we want to add and update. First things first, let's click this Edit button. Here we can check, really what we're looking at is the email and phone number fields. Obviously your email had to be correct in order for you to get that activation email and set your username and password up. But if you've got a newer email that you're using that you check more often than this one, you're welcome to update it. And of course you want to just double check that your phone number, which may not be in here at all, that your phone number is in there and correct. Don't worry about the rest of this stuff. All of that we'll get to later. So once everything's ready, you just hit save and we'll come on down to the address fields. So there's two addresses. Let's take a look at the home address first. Now this is actually probably the most important thing for you to fill in initially because the address, specifically the postal code, is really what A In Home Tutors uses to match you with students based on your location. So if they don't know where you are, you're not going to come up on any of the searches and you're not going to get any students. That's no good. So let's get that address in there. Okay, once we've got that address in there, we hit save and we're set. Now the billing address is only really important if you want your paychecks to come to a different address than your home address, because it's like a PO box or for tax purposes or something. So if you'd like to set a different billing address, you can just hit that edit button there and fill in the separate billing address there. That's just fine. Or you can just leave it blank and it'll go to your home address. That's all right as well. Coming on down to the tags section. Now, these user tags are labels that you can give to yourself to let the administrators know what you can teach. Now, these tags are pretty all-purpose, so there are going to be some tags that you see here that don't really make any sense, like $25 coupon, that's for the administrators to use, so don't really worry about that. But what I would do is page down the pages here. There's a bunch of them. Page, look at all these tags here, and just go ahead and add whatever subjects you feel comfortable teaching. So if you know you can teach biology, you can just click on that biology. You see I clicked here and that adds it to my account. Page to the next page. Maybe I can teach chemistry as well. I click on chemistry. Perfect, I've got the chemistry tag. So just go through this list and add any and all of the tags that you need to your account. If there is a tag that you want to add, but you don't see it here in the database, just reach out to the administrators and ask them to add that tag to the database so that you can do it. Maybe it's called something unexpected and they'll let you know what that is. But you only have the ability to tag yourself. You don't have the ability to add those tags to the database. And once you have your correct contact information in there, once you've got your address and your tags filled in, your profile is complete. All right, let's talk about one of your first big responsibilities and another item you'll probably want to do pretty much immediately after you create your account, and that's talking about availability. So let's head over to the calendar, go to the main calendar tab right here, and you'll be able to see your calendar from this main calendar tab. Now, before we actually talk about the availability itself, let's talk a little bit about how the calendar works from a general standpoint. So if you've used other calendar apps in the past, like Google Calendar or Apple's Calendar, this should look pretty familiar to you. We've got different views up here, a month, week, and a day view. Now this column view is really more used for administrators, so don't worry too much about that. You can page from screen to screen with these buttons. You can click that Go To button and go to whatever date you'd like, and you can always head back to today's screen with that Today button. In the bottom left-hand side, there are some viewing options. There's at least a couple that I really suggest you enable. In particular, event names, weekends definitely, if you do any work on weekends. Available, we're gonna need that to be able to see our availability as we put it down on the calendar. I like locations. Of course, subjects, if you wanna know what subject you're teaching on the calendar. And then I also like highlight today. That places a blue bar down on that calendar and it helps me orient myself. The last general point I'm going to make about the calendar is, what is it for? So the calendar serves two purposes. One, the thing we're going to talk about right now, is it lets you put your availability down so that the administrators can see when you are available to tutor. And it also allows you to schedule sessions in advance, and that we'll talk about in a later section of the video. But for now, let's talk about that availability portion. Let's say I'm available on Mondays from 2 p.m. all the way until 8 p.m. What I'm gonna do is start out almost as if I was like scheduling an event on the calendar. When I roll my mouse over the calendar, you'll see it sort of highlights in this light blue color. I'm gonna click on that 2 p.m. time slot under Monday the 6th, and that's gonna bring up this add event form. There's a lot of information here. Again, I'm gonna ignore most of it because we're talking about availability. So all I'm gonna show you is what's necessary for availability in particular. First thing, let's check this available checkbox. That tells LearnSpeed this is availability. This isn't an appointment. Second thing, let's make sure the start and end times are correct. I said 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., so I can either set that duration to 6 hours, and that will adjust it down to 8, or I can just click on this end time and adjust it with my mouse. It's a little bit of a weird picker, but you'll see how it works. Let me show you. So I roll my mouse down to that first hour row, and I come over to the 08 for 8. Then I roll my mouse down to the minute row and I see that 00 for 8 o'clock. And then I roll my mouse one row down and I'm gonna hit that PM. So it's a little bit weird. You kind of have to think like those old snake games, those old Nokia snake games. So once you get it, it's very, very quick to do. Now, this is just going to put down a single block of availability. What happens if you want to be available every Monday? Well, you guessed it, it's that recurring checkbox. So I'm going to check this to let LearnSpeed know that this is every week, not just this week. And I'm going to select Mondays because that's the day it's recurring. Now I have a choice. I either want to select the number or the date. I think a date makes more sense for availability. I'm not saying like I'm available for 15 weeks or whatever. I'm just available until a particular date. So I'll click on that date field and select, let's see, the end of the school year seems reasonable. I'll pick the end of June. You can always change this later, so there's no way to overschedule anything. That's really all you need. Just that start and end time, making sure those recurring settings are right, and of course, checking that available checkbox to LearnSpeed know that this is available. So hit save, and I'll place it down on the calendar. Now let's say you're available for more than one day of the week. That's just fine. You're more than welcome to add as many recurring series as you would like. For example, I just added a new recurring series that's totally separate from my Monday availability. It's 4 to 8 p.m. and I just set it up so that it's recurring Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays using exactly the same procedure. So that's how you can set your availability up at different times on different days. Now, sometimes though, there are going to be one-time occasions where you are not going to be available. Let's say next week, for example, that I'm not available at all on Wednesday, and I just want to take it off my calendar. That's really, really easy. So I'm going to head over to the right, and I'm going to click on that Wednesday block of availability, and there's a bunch of options here at the top, and I just want to hit delete event. So I'm just going to delete this and hit OK, and bada bing, my Wednesday availability is gone. Now, if I page to the next week, it's back because that delete event only deletes the one. The same thing goes when you want to adjust your availability for a one-time change. So again, let's say Thursday, maybe on Thanksgiving, I'm available, but only in the morning. So I'll page over to Thanksgiving, the 23rd, click on that, and instead of saying delete, I'm just going to head over here and hit edit single. That lets me edit my availability just the once. And then I'm going to shift this beginning time maybe from 4 p.m. all the way up to 10 o'clock a.m. And of course, the end time follows suit here, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm actually going to even shorten this guy up and hit save. So that's how to delete a day of availability. That's how to adjust a day of availability. Now let's say there's something that happens and you need to change your availability going forward for every week, not just a one-time thing. Well, that's really easy. Let's page to the next week and take a look. So let's say starting this week, my availability changes. I could do one of two things. I could click on the first day at which it changes and just hit delete future, wipe it all out from here on out, and then start fresh with a new recurring series of availability. Or I can also hit edit series. I think this is a little bit easier. I hit edit series and a new form comes up. It's a little different, but it's got all of the same information. So if I need to shorten up my availability, or maybe I'm not available on Thursdays anymore, I can just uncheck Thursday, and that's going to affect everything all the way down to the summer of next year. And we've got Thursdays are gone. All right, so that's about all you need to know for your availability. So as a reminder, it is your responsibility every week to make sure that your availability is accurate. The A+ In Home Tutors administrators do rely on this availability to know when you can tutor, and that's important. Okay, let's talk about the process of getting you connected to a student and what you need to do when you are connected with that student. We've already seen how you can add your address and your user tags into your profile. Now you can add your availability to the calendar, and the administrators are going to use those three items to determine what the right tutor is for any particular student. And they're going to reach out to you once they have matched you with the student. Once you receive that email or phone call, it's your responsibility to in turn reach out to the family to get a schedule started. But before you do, come on into LearnSpeed and take a look at that student's account. Now you can get to any of your students' accounts by typing their name in the search bar if you know the student's name. So for example, my new student Armin, I'll just type in Armin and his name pops up. I can click on his name and get to his account page straight away. Or I could go through the People tab. If you click on the People tab, that shows all of the students that you've been linked to, and I can click on his name here. Now, if you have a student but you don't see them on the list or you can't search for them, just reach out to the administrators and let them know. They need to manually connect you with that student in order for you to have access to that student's account. All right, I'm going to click on Armin's account and go to his account page. This is what a student account page looks like. You're going to have some basic contact information here at the top, more for the parent than for the student, really, but there's some stuff for the student, like the grade that he's in and the school that he's at. There's also the address, likely for the student and parent, which is going to be relevant for you since your location of tutoring is likely going to be in the home. And below that, there's a series of sub-tabs. Some of these you're not really going to have to worry about, but I'll mention them anyway. The sessions is where all of the session reports are going to live once you've logged them. Now, Armin's a new student. He doesn't have any sessions on the books yet, so this is empty, but they'll be here when we log them. Armin's calendar is also empty. This is not where you want to schedule. We'll talk about scheduling students in just a second, and that'll happen from the main calendar tab, but this is a good way for you to look at Armin's calendar if that's something you want to do. Tasks are really more used for administrators, so don't really worry too much about that. Work orders is really where we want to start here. Now, a work order is like a learning plan or some sort of intake document. It talks about the concerns and objectives that the student has to help you make the most of your first couple sessions and really understand what they want to get out of tutoring. So you can see he's interested in algebra help here. There's a lot more information though, and I get that if I roll my mouse over the eye. So this little pop-up has all of the information in the work order. And if I'd like to keep the pop-up around so that I don't have to hold my mouse exactly where it is right now, I can just click on that pop-up to pin it, and then I can drag it around and resize it. And this is really helpful in case you want to make the window bigger to make it easier to read. So this is all the basic information, concern, history, objectives. One big one is scheduling. Of course, if you're going to reach out to the family about scheduling, you should know what they want to do for the schedule. And you can even leave this up and call the parent and get a schedule hashed out. One last thing that you should be aware of are session credits. Now, not every student has session credits. Armin doesn't, for example. But if I head to another one of my students, let's say Brianna. Brianna has session credits. Session credits are for students who have purchase orders through charter schools. And we use these session credits to track how many hours are left of service in those purchase order. So you can see that Brianna has 4 hours left of her purchase order. And although you likely know how many hours of service they have from that initial email you received from the administrators, it's always helpful to know how many hours they have left. And that's about all you need to know about student accounts at this point. When you get matched with that student, you reach out, you give the family a call, you hash out a schedule over the phone, and you put that schedule into the calendar. And that's what's up in the next section. Okay, let's talk about scheduling sessions on the calendar. Now you'll notice here, I'm in the main calendar tab. As I mentioned in an earlier section, you want to schedule here. You do not want to schedule from your students' accounts, but here on your calendar in the main calendar tab. We've been here before, so I'll skip the tour, but I will mention one thing, and that's that the calendar is a required step. So in order to log your sessions, in order to get paid and to send your notes out after the sessions happen, you need to have those sessions in the calendar first. So this is the first of 2 steps to getting your sessions correctly logged in the system. And it's an important step, so you may as well get those sessions out in advance on the calendar and use it like the scheduling app it's supposed to be. As you might remember from a previous section, my new student Armin wants to work with me every Tuesday and Thursday going forward, and we are going to get that started in the calendar in just a second. But first, I want to show you how to add a one-time session in case you do want to work with a student just one time without setting up that recurring series of sessions. So let's say my other student, Brianna, wants just a one-time session here on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. That's fine. I've got that wide open, so I'll schedule that on the calendar. So here's how to do that. Just like before, I'm going to click on that 6 p.m. time slot. Now notice where my mouse is here. It's not over the availability. It's here in this little gutter, because if I click over the availability, that brings me to edit my availability. I don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is click in the gutter at that 6 p.m. time slot, and that will get me to the add event form. Now we're going to delve a little bit more into some of these options here, but let's get some of the basic stuff down first. 6 to 7 is okay for me. The duration is default to 1, so if that works, then great. We do work in fractions of an hour, so let's say you've got an hour and 45-minute session. That would be 1.75 hours, and of course the end time adjusts as a result. But I'll leave that at 1 hour for this one. Now, this is not a recurring series, so I'm going to leave this blank, and it's also not available, so I'm going to leave it blank. Really, the only thing we're missing fundamentally is Brianna. Right now, it's on my calendar, but Brianna is not on the event. How do I add her? Well, that's easy. You click Add Attendee. I'm going to click that, and a little form pops up. And I can either click on it or even just start typing Brianna and pick her from the list. There we go. So once it looks like this, you've added your student. Now I want to make one quick note. There is an event name field up here, and you're welcome to name the event whatever you like. But I want to let you know that simply adding the student's name to the event name field is not enough to connect that student's account with this on the calendar. You're welcome to name this whatever you want, but do make sure that you add the student as an attendee. There's a couple other things I really want to encourage you to add. First thing you want to add is the subject. Now we have a bunch of subjects in the system, as I'm sure you know from adding them to your account as user tags. And this list only goes to, about middle of the C's. So if you have a subject, just start typing it in. And that list will show you everything that matches up here. So if I'm teaching physics, I just pick physics, and that's my subject on the calendar. The session type is another important item, and this warrants a little bit more explanation. There are 4 session types in the system, and each of them corresponds to a particular service that you offer. Session rate is perfect for most students. The only times that you would use intervention, EL, or special education is if you're working with a student in one of those 3 programs. And in that case, the name of the student will actually include special ed, intervention, or EL. So if the name of the student does not have one of those words on it, you just select session rate. So we've got all of this in here. We've got our subject and session type. We have, importantly, our student to teach. We have our logistical information intact, and we can just hit save, and that is a very nice one-time session. Great, now that my session with Brianna is down over my availability, let's get Armin's sessions in as well. So Tuesdays, Thursdays at 4 p.m. is the schedule, so I'm going to click again in that gutter at that 4 p.m. time slot. I'm going to, just as before, confirm the 4 to 5 p.m. That's perfect. I'm going to add Armin as a student, very important. I'm going to select the subject. This is algebra. And again, Armin is not one of these other 3, so I'm going to select session rate. Now finally, because this is a recurring session, I'm going to select that recurring checkbox again, just like we did with availability. And that's going to bring up some options. Every Tuesday and Thursday is appropriate. And then again, we have a choice. Do we have a date or a number? Now, if you're working with a student with a purchase order, and we saw how those were tracked using session credits, number might make sense. You know exactly how many sessions you have to book with that student before their purchase order expires. In that case, you can type in a number, and it'll just put down that many sessions on the calendar. For Armin, though, as I mentioned, he doesn't have that purchase order. He's just working every week with me, Tuesday, Thursday, so that's great. I'll go ahead and select a date again until the end of the school year. However you do, you need to choose one of those. But once you're done, you just hit save, and it's put down on the calendar. So let's quickly talk about how to adjust or reschedule or cancel sessions, which works a lot like adjusting or rescheduling or canceling availability. So let's take a look at Thanksgiving again. I'll page a couple of weeks in the future. We'll take a look at Thanksgiving. He's scheduled at a time that I am not available. So anytime you want to make a change to a particular event, you just click on that and then you choose. Do I want to edit this single event? Maybe I want to delete it. In this case, Armin's family is going to be booked up the entire day. They just want to cancel this Thursday session. So I'll click delete event and OK, and that will remove that event from my calendar. Now, there are going to be some situations in which the family cancels or tries to reschedule, but you've already left for the session. In that case, it's considered a late cancel, and we'll get into that in a later section of the video. This is all assuming that the family cancels with enough time that you will not be charging them. So let's talk about how to edit a session on the calendar. Just as with availability, if you want to edit something, you can click on it, and then you can select Edit Single to edit the single event. This is going to look pretty familiar to you. You can change a lot about the event. You can change the subject, you can change the start and end time, the duration, any of that. You can even change the name. And then at that point, you hit save, and that adjusts just that single event. You can also edit everything going forward. So maybe because I'm not available on Thursday, I need to change the day of the week that this is, starting with this one. So I'll click on the one just before, just to be safe, hit Edit Series, and then again, change Thursday to Wednesday, and now I'm going to see Armin Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and hit Save. Now it should be noted that all of these changes should only happen after you've confirmed with the family that they're okay. Finally, there's one more tool that I want to show you that I think is pretty nifty. A lot of times, the only change you'll need to make is to change the time of a session to reschedule it. And in that case, we can actually use our drag and drop functionality. So in this case, maybe just tomorrow, Armin is not available at 4 p.m. Every other day 4 p.m., but they called and asked to schedule it at 5 p.m. I could go through the whole thing of clicking on the event, clicking Edit Single, and changing it, or I could use drag and drop. All I have to do, click it, drag it, and drop it at my new time slot or new day, and that single event is changed. All right, that's about all you need to know for scheduling sessions on the calendar. Last reminder, this is a really important and necessary step. You can't log your sessions properly unless they're on the calendar first. So if you do forget, and you do need to log a session after it happened, you still need to do it on the calendar, but I really encourage you to try to be proactive about scheduling and get things in before they happen so that they're there and tracked for you on the calendar. Okay, let's talk about logging your sessions after they happen. As I mentioned a couple times in the calendar section of the video, simply booking sessions on the calendar is not enough to get paid for them. That's only scheduling sessions so that they're there for the future. In order to actually record that a session really happened and you ought to get paid, you need to log your session. Now that happens here on the home screen under the Sessions Needing Reports widgets. Now you're going to see a Timesheets tab up here. And we've labeled it Admins Only because we want to make very clear that although you might be used to thinking of logging your time as a timesheet or paid time, that's not really the way LearnSpeed works. We're a very student-focused software, and we really focus on logging your session with your student. Now don't worry, your paid time is being tracked in the background, and you are going to get paid for these sessions, so don't worry about that. But don't think to come here. Instead, you want to go here. Now, sessions are only going to show up here if they are on the calendar, and LearnSpeed is tracking them. So if you have a session that you think should be showing up here, and it isn't, you should take a look at your calendar and make sure that you booked it on the calendar properly. I have a couple sessions from last week that are way overdue, as evidenced by the fact that they are red here in LearnSpeed. A In Home Tutors has a strict 24-hour policy on session reports. What that means is within 24 hours of the session, you need to log your session report. And these session reports are going to contain both logistical billing information and your pay information, but also feedback for the student, which is really important to give to them in a timely manner. So it's really important. Try your hardest to get all of your sessions done within 24 hours and let none of them show up in red as they are here. So let's get to it. I'm going to go ahead and log these in the order that they happen, starting with Brianna's. To log any session, just click this plus session button, and that'll bring you to a blue session form. Some of this stuff is pre-populated from the calendar. The date and time, the length, the subject, all of those come from the calendar. If you entered a session type in the calendar, as I showed you in the calendar section of the video, it'll show up here. But if you forgot or something happened, it might be blank. Now you're not going to be able to log a session without a session type, so just click that drop-down arrow and select the session type that's in the list. The session type, as I mentioned in the past, affects the billing rate, and it affects our tracking of purchase orders in those cases where that matters, so it's really important that you get it right. So if there's more than one option and you're not sure which one to choose, don't hesitate to ask. All right, so I'll do select session rate here though, and we'll see those session credits pop up. This is another place where you can keep an eye on how many credits a student has left in their purchase order. Now let's come on down here to the attendance option. We have 3 options for attended, absent, and late cancel. I'll use the next 2 session reports to talk about the other options. For now, let's say Brianna attended this session. Down below that, We have 4 ratings. You'll have an opportunity to rate your students on 4 options. Preparation, were they prepared for the session? Engagement, how engaged were they in learning during the session? How much progress did they make? Were they on track to hit their goals? And then this isn't really a rating, but did you assign them homework during the session? And if you did, you'll want to add it to the note. Speaking of notes, there are 4 note fields here on the right-hand side. You're only going to use 2 of them regularly, but let's talk about all 4. Let's start with a group note. This is really only useful for large group tutoring, which you won't be doing, so we won't worry about that. The parent note seems pretty logical, but I want to let you know that there are some accounts that have parents set up as schools, in particular the intervention, EL, and special ed accounts. All of the parents are schools. Because of this, we do not want you to write your note in the parent note. In fact, we want you to write your note in the student note. This will go to the student for sure if the student has that email address in the system, but you should be aware that a copy of the student note also can go to the parent. So this is really a public note. It's the best place for you to put your notes. So let's get into what constitutes a really good note. You want to provide constructive feedback, and that means being honest if the student isn't prepared, wasn't low engagement, or is not on track. The point of this feedback is so that administrators and parents and students are all on the same page with you about what needs to be done to really get towards the student's goals. So be polite and professional, but be honest. If you have any questions about what a really good session note looks like, feel free to ask the administrators. Finally, let's talk about the admin note. Admin notes don't get emailed out to the parent or student, and even other instructors can't see your admin notes. So this is a great place for you to say something that might be a little bit more sensitive or confidential. Any thoughts you have that you just want an administrator to see, that's the admin note. There's one more item I want to cover, but before I do, I want to show you the Save Draft button. At any point during the time you create a session report, you can click that Save Draft button to save a draft of the session, and you can always come back to it later. I always observe the cardinal rule, save early and save often. It's always a bummer when you write a great note and you forget to save and come back and it's gone. Okay, here's the last item, and that's the requires attention checkbox. All this does is flag the session for the administrator's attention with a bright orange exclamation point. But this is actually very useful if you do want to get the administrator's attention. The point of this checkbox is, if you think that the administrators need to know that the student was having trouble during the session, or you have a note for them in the admin note, anything that needs their special attention, you check this box. This just ensures that the administrators will take a closer look at your session report and make sure that none of that stuff falls through the cracks. Okay, that's about all you really need to know for a session report. So once you're done, you hit save and your session has been submitted. And again, I'll mention, at this point, your timesheet for your time has been submitted as well. So your pay is being tracked in the background, and you're going to get paid for that session as soon as it's approved. Let's move on to the next one. I'll click that plus session button. As before, some of this information is pre-populated for us, including in this case, the session type and the subject. Now let's get into these other attendance options. We talked about attended. Obviously, that's when the student attends, like Brianna did. But you also need to log a session report if the student was absent or if the student canceled but you were already on your way. The rule of thumb here is this: if you are going to get paid and the family is going to get billed, then you need a session report. If not, then you don't. So if you go to the house and the student is simply absent, the lights are out, you knock, you wait, they're not there, you still need to log a session report so that you can get paid. Just set the attendance to absent, don't worry about any of the ratings, and in the student note, in lieu of an actual note, just indicate the circumstances of the absence for the record. Pretty quick, just hit save, and at that point, you're going to be paid for your time even if the student wasn't there. There's another scenario in which you'll want to log a session, and that's with a late cancellation. So let's say Danielle's family called to cancel, but I was already on my way to the tutoring session at that point. In that case, it's not really an absence. They did call me in advance, but they're still going to get charged and I'm still going to be paid for my time. In that case, I'm going to log a late cancellation. And just as before, I'm not going to worry about the ratings, And just as before, I'm going to indicate the circumstances of the late cancellation here in the student note field in lieu of an actual note. And once you're done with that, you can hit save as before. There's one more scenario I want to go over with you, and that has a lot to do with the late cancellation. As I mentioned, it's considered a late cancel if you're already on your way to the tutoring session when the family cancels. In that case, you do get paid. But what happens if a family canceled with you before that deadline and you just forgot to take the session off your calendar beforehand? Well, it's going to pop up here in LearnSpeed, like Brianna's session from last week. In that case, we want to get it out of our way. The session didn't really happen. I don't want it clogging up my sessions needing reports. So the temptation sometimes is to click that plus session button and log it as a cancel. We don't want to do this. Again, the rule of thumb is if the family is not going to be billed, then I do not want a session report. If the family is going to be billed, I do. So because this family canceled and I just forgot to pull it off, all we're going to do is actually delete it from the calendar. That'll get it out of my way. So I can actually hit this view event link, bring me straight to the event, and then just hit that delete button. Delete this event. Okay. And if I head back to the home screen, it's gone from my list. So if you have a student who canceled but you forgot to update your calendar, just go back and update your calendar and it'll be removed from your list. If you have any more questions about when to log what kind of session and when not to log a session report, don't hesitate to contact the administrators. Okay, let's quickly recap what we've covered in the video. We talked about how to activate your account using that email that the administrators will send you. Once you've activated and logged in, we talked about how to fill out your profile in the My Account screen and how to add your availability to your calendar and keep that availability up to date. Those two things will be used to match you with students who fit your schedule and who fit your skills. Then we talked about how to actually schedule your students on the calendar, which I will remind you is a necessary step to getting paid. Finally, we talked about how to log your sessions, what situations you do log a session report and what situations you don't. I want to take one more opportunity to emphasize how important correctly scheduling sessions in the calendar and correctly logging sessions here on the home screen are to your paycheck and A+ In Home Tutors billing. In order for the software to correctly track your hours and provide pay data to the administrators, you need to correctly enter your data in the system. So if you have any questions at all about any of these items that we've covered in the video, please do contact the administrators and they can help answer your questions. So from all of us here at LearnSpeed, welcome aboard and thanks for watching.